YWT, the Philadelphia Flyers podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Collington. Joining me today, the one and only Mr. Kevin Durso. How are you, buddy?
I'm doing pretty good after last night, I'll say.
You know, isn't it nice that when a game's on late, you can kind of go to bed after the third quarter's over? If you really wanted to.
I mean, I didn't because I was also, like, I had to drive a buddy home and stuff, so I didn't get to do that. But nonetheless, you know, when you've anticipated it, especially as this city has, when you've anticipated a game for 2 weeks and it goes about as smoothly as you can possibly imagine, you know, it's fun times. And who knows, you know, one more game and we may be having the same experience we had in October, you know?
All right, we're not a football podcast. We're not going to dive too deep into it. But real quick, as an Eagles fan, who do you want them to play next week? Obviously, we are recording this before the Niners-Cowboys game.
Is this like a who would I prefer?
Sure, yeah. I'm sure you'd prefer to see the Cowboys because the Niners are a wagon.
I actually kind of think it's the other way around. I feel like because I feel like at some point I'd rather have the team that travels further, the team that's kind of on a quarterback that's running on magic.
You're telling me you don't want Eagles Cowboys NFC Championship game? Come on.
No, you know what I'm saying with that is that I think that the Cowboys would be tougher. Is my point.
Okay, and that's what I think. And you know what? We will talk about it on next week's show, and because I mean, they'll already know who we're playing by the time the show goes up. So
pretty close, yeah.
Yeah. All right, let's dive into it. To be quite honest, we're going to dive right into our stuff in just a second. We're starting on a little bit of a disappointing note. Before that, make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're really trying to grow over there, trying to get some stuff going. Follow us on Twitter, YWT Podcast, Kevin at Kevin_Durso. All right, so getting right into it. Flyers were kind of the talk of the hockey world this week.
For sure.
And quite frankly, it wasn't for the dominating win over the Anaheim Ducks. It's kind of all about the pregame skate. It's about the Ivan Provorov situation. I'm sure most people have heard about it by now. He declined to take warmups on Tuesday night and therefore declined to participate in the team's Pride Night, you know, as part of the You Can Play initiative. He declined to take part. After the game, he cited his religious beliefs, said he wanted to stay true to his religion.
And true to himself.
Yeah, and true to himself. Kevin, we're going to throw it over to you. You said you know what you want to say about this.
Well, because I spent a lot of time. Well, first of all, I spent a lot of time thinking about it pretty much all week, because first of all, it was all anybody talked about for roughly 48 hours from the time that we knew this was the story.
It was the biggest story in hockey.
I mean, like, it's from the moment that the statement came out, basically post-game, almost immediately, to the time when the puck hit the ice again for them on Thursday, and really beyond, because even then, you know, it was still a big time. It was still the big time. It was still the big time talk of the league and all that stuff like that. And there was no other Flyer story, and it was going to be a headline no matter what. You can say that this is a media driven thing and whatnot. That's, you know what, that's your opinion. I respect that, but it was the story. From my perspective, and this has nothing to do with the story itself, but I'm talking about from a working perspective. I don't stay down after a game for much more than 10 to 15 minutes once we wrap post game. Like, right. I go down,
hanging around.
No, I go down. I do the interviews. I go back upstairs. I probably, because majority of the games that happen, something happens in the last 5 minutes that I don't get to write about. So it's an unfinished game recap that I have to finish putting together, get all the final numbers in, and then I publish. And as soon as I'm done publishing, I start packing up and I leave. Right. It's pretty obvious that would put me in a range of I'm out of there by 10:30 most nights.
Fair.
I knew after this, like, I get my stuff done and all that. I knew that I was not going to be able to leave the arena until I wrote about that part of the story too.
Absolutely.
And it almost felt I don't want to say not wrong, but like felt like I was doing things out of order because the recap wasn't up yet. And I could have posted, like, if I could have posted the recap before I went downstairs to do all of this part of the work, then the recap would have been up there and it would have been like, hey, by the way, this is a story. There will be more. We're waiting to talk to people, and then you'll get it. I had to go back upstairs, publish the recap as if it mattered anymore, and then write that story. But it's my job to write that story. That's the point. Like, it was there. So in giving it a lot of thought, I think that this situation really reflects the lack of middle ground that we have in society, because there was no commonality to any of this. the way that our society is, somebody has to be right and somebody has to be wrong. And there's very little harmony on that. I'm talking about in general. I'm not talking about my opinion. I'm talking about this is the way it usually is. So to some people, what Ivan Provorov did was completely wrong, and how the Flyers handled it was wrong, and the league's response was wrong, and so on.
And on the flip side of that, his jersey sold out the next day.
Well, and to others, Ivan Provorov had a right to choose what he believes and what he wanted to do. He did. The team acknowledged that while staying true to their beliefs on what the night meant. And this is a non-story, because there's people out there that are sitting here going, what are you doing talking about this? This is a total non-story, fabrication, blah, 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 right? Like, there's people out there that are posting that. Like, get off of this non-story. It's media fabricated, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, to each their own. And I think that realistically, the truth of the matter is that it is somewhere in the middle, but we never get to see that part of it. Ivan Provorov absolutely has the right to choose what to do in that moment. He does. That's America.
And the NHL backed that up in their statement.
Sure.
Sorry, I have it up here. I do just want to read a piece of it because it's relevant right there. Is players are free to decide which initiatives to support, and we continue to encourage their voices and perspectives on social and cultural issues.
And look, obviously not everyone is going to agree with his choice, and not everybody is going to interpret the choice the same way, but you can't take that part away from him. Each in the same breath of saying he's got the right to choose, we all have the right. Every person out there who watches the sport, who doesn't watch the sport, who just found it as a story, each one of us has the right to perceive him however we want to, and he has the right to make that choice. That's why it's divided in the first place.
Yep.
So one thing that I know that I have a problem with out of all of this is not even something that I think that was out there as much on the night of. I don't know that the organization's response was the best, and here's why. Ivan Provorov has been with this organization for almost 8 years. If you don't have any clue by now what his personal beliefs are and his religion is and all of that, then you don't know anything about the people within your own organization. And to find out and John Tortorella is the one who brought this to light, to find out that this was talked about in advance of the night, as much as 2 days to a week. The night in general, they announced these theme nights months in advance. You've known all season that this was supposed to be Pride Night. So there could have been better preparation in how to address this other than just to suddenly have him not be out there for warmups to create speculation that, is he traded? Is he hurt? Is he sick? What's the reason? Like, he just didn't come out.
So
then we find out later the reasoning behind it, but he just wasn't there. And then he shows up and plays in the game. It was like, so what gives? What's the story here?
Well, quite frankly, I think from kind of what's trickled out about who knew and when they knew and who talked to who and Scott Laughton and JVR were involved, based on kind of all the things that have trickled out, it seems like the Flyers were kind of relying on peer pressure and hoping that Provi would change his mind and just wear the jersey. But
this is my problem with it, okay? So if nobody outside of those within these conversations, and what we've heard is that, it was, nobody outside those conversations knew that Provorov wasn't going to be out there prior to the game. So, like, it's a very limited group that knew exactly how this was going to play out and how it did play out. It looks worse when you consider that, sure, maybe Provorov and John Tortorella talk about it. Maybe Provorov and Scott Laughton talked about it, and Laughton's in on those conversations. Maybe Chuck Fletcher's in on those conversations, as was indicated by Tortorella. But how does ownership representation not know anything about this leading up to? Is there that much of a disconnect in your organization that you don't know this stuff across the board? Because that I have a huge problem with. I mean, let's put it this way, and you want the easiest resolution to the whole thing leading in? They didn't announce that jerseys were even part of this until Tuesday morning. If you had a conversation on Sunday about it, and there's no way to change, he's going to make his choice, what his choice is going to be, and he's going to follow through with it, then why didn't you just pull the jerseys before anybody knew about it? If it leaks out after the fact, then you've got another problem on your hands, and I get that. But
because I think the team still wanted to wear the jerseys.
But I just don't understand why you couldn't figure out something else that involves the jerseys in some way without making it part of the pregame skate where everybody wasn't going to be on board with it. That's the thing. Like honestly, let the two players that have the biggest involvement in the initiative put their jerseys up for auction that they were going to, like, make it seem like they wanted to have the jerseys made, and they had a jersey, you know, Scott Lawton had a jersey with those numbers made for him, and JVR did, or something.
Before we dive too deep in on kind of what happened and getting into it, I do just want to make it clear my opinion.
Okay. Before
we kind of dive into exactly the details of the situation. If you know me personally, the following statement is not going to come as much of a surprise. I strongly, heavily support the LGBTQIA plus community. I don't think I've ever been as personally disappointed with a Flyers player as I was on Tuesday night / Wednesday. I have an Ivan Provorov Stadium Series jersey, the black one from a couple of years ago.
Yeah, the one they wore later that night as the alternate, but
that I'm strongly considering getting renumbered. I'm not going to burn it. I'm not going to, whatever. I spent a lot of money on that jersey. I'm not going to burn it. But I am strongly considering getting it renumbered. I don't think Ivan Provorov should have been compelled to wear the jersey if he was unwilling to. Mm-hmm. I think he should have had the right to choose to do what he did, to sit out the warm-up, to not participate. You are entitled to your opinions. You're not entitled to how others feel about your opinions. And I'm severely disappointed. I don't know if push came to shove in his personal life. I don't know if you asked Ivan Provorov if he would support gay marriage or not. It sounds like he wouldn't, certainly. But if you really ask him deep down, one thing I do want to mention, just because it is something that is relevant, whether we want to admit it or not, mm-hmm. He is of Russian descent. Mm-hmm. He cited the Russian Orthodox religion as one of his primary reasons. It would be naive to not acknowledge the fact that that country uses religion and political pressure in the same breath. I'm not saying that's what's happening. I'm not saying Ivan Provorov may just be, in my personal opinion, a garbage human being for his opinions. But if it comes out at some point in the future that maybe he's not quite as close-minded as he appears, keep in mind who's in charge in his home country, and keep in mind what all that means.
Fair, and that's fair too.
That being said,
and if I may inject one piece of thought that I had based on what you just said.
Yeah.
To be honest, I was surprised that he actually verbally mentioned what his religion is when it came maybe within 5-10 seconds after he had made his own little statement and then said, I'll take your hockey questions, but I'm not talking anymore. So the fact that he even gave you what the religion was, because then that leads to people kind of doing their own research on, well, what is it? Because I understand not everybody's going to know every religion that's out there. So when he says it, about how many people do you think went to Google and it's like, well, what does this religion say? Right?
Willing to bet it did some low level of trending.
Sure. So I was actually a little surprised that he, because somebody, I think if I remember correctly, he made his statement, like he answered the first question addressing it, said he wasn't going to take any more questions on it. God asked another question, I think, kind of in line with it, and was shaking his head like, "No, I'm really not going to do this," or whatever. And then did answer the question about, "And what's your religion again?" Like just to try to figure it out, but not figure it out, just to get confirmation, I guess. Because listen, for a story like this, if that's what you're going to say your belief is, it does help to, from a reporter standpoint, it helps to know exactly where you stand.
For sure.
And I was surprised that he actually said what it was, as opposed to sticking with I said I'm not answering questions. Right. So he did say what it was. So yeah. I was surprised.
But all of that being said, how garbage do you have to be that Tony DeAngelo is not the worst person on your defensive core? That was a joke.
Yeah, I know. That's why I kind of tried to check.
I know. So the thing is, The other joke that I made the night of is, man, really? We start talking about trading him, and then all of a sudden he's coming out and doing stuff like this. It's not going to help the trade value.
Definitely not right now. Not when you're in the middle of a story like this.
As far as what the team knew when the team knew it, that to me all still sounds like the hockey ops were really hoping that he would change his mind and they wouldn't have to tell the big boys upstairs that this is going on. Because that's how it reads to me. Is we've heard stuff that the team was considering not wearing the jerseys all the way up until Tuesday morning.
And I can't, and I'm going to tell you right now, I can't buy that, and I'll tell you why. Because the same player was also asked about a specific world affair, and we don't need to go into deep. Like we're not a political or we're not a world news podcast.
Certainly
but
not.
There was something going on in the world that involved his home country, right? Several months ago is when it started.
Yep.
And he was asked about it then, and he basically said, my political views or almost to say my opinions on something like this is nobody's business anyway, and all this stuff. So you knew his response to something like that, and you know that there's probably an element in that answer that is, I'm not getting into it because I'm just not getting into it, and it can be his own internal beliefs, but there's also probably an element to it, as you alluded to.
I know my opinion's unpopular.
No, there's also probably a part of it that too. No, but there's that. Well, I'm saying you're probably that's probably the first part, but the other part is you're probably right. There's an element of it where it's like I have to watch what I say because this is the way that that country is.
We've seen
my family could be in trouble.
Right,
Exactly.
We've seen repercussions. The Artemi Panarin situation. The Artemi Panarin situation was insane. They essentially fabricated a sexual assault and hauled him back to Russia and
I mean, do you need any more specifically around this organization, no less? Do you need any bigger example than Ivan Fedotov?
Right.
And what's going on?
Yep.
That all he wanted to do was try to continue his hockey career in North America, and they basically told him,
nope,
absolutely not.
Get
and they
to the
forced
Arctic.
him and they forced him into his military duties
for a year or maybe
for a year or
we'll
more.
See. Right.
So, when you look at the state of affairs over there, you understand there has to be a little bit of a level of understanding as to why a player does not elaborate on certain things when that is the home country we're talking about.
And I am hoping that that's the case here, because I don't want to believe that Ivan Provorov's a terrible person, quite frankly. And if he holds these beliefs, in my opinion, he's a terrible person. I will say that clearly on the podcast. If you are homophobic, if you are transphobic, if you do not support the LGBTQIA plus community, in my personal opinion, I'm not speaking for Kevin, I'm not speaking for the show, I am speaking for myself. If you hold those opinions, you are garbage. You do not deserve to play hockey. You do not deserve to make millions of dollars doing so. You don't deserve a platform. You don't.
Do you want to know something I will say based on what you just said, though?
Okay.
There's a word that you just used in there that I think changes the game a little bit. Because you said something about if you don't support. I don't know that you have to support them as much as be aware and understanding. Awareness and understanding are very good words in this, and to an extent, respect.
When I say support regarding the LGBTQIA plus community, I'm referring to the fact that you believe they should exist.
Acknowledging them as human beings.
They are full human beings.
Right.
They should have the right to love who they want to love. They should have the right to get married. They should have the right to be a normal human being.
But that's my point of awareness and understanding and respecting other lifestyle.
I just want to make sure we're on the same page.
The fabric of America is we're not all the same.
Yeah, no kidding.
Now, so to continue where my thoughts were, by the way, in general with this, nobody wins in the situation to me, truly, because let's say the Knights' purpose of what it was supposed to be was completely overshadowed by this.
Sure.
And listen, you can't take that away.
Yep.
It makes Ivan Provorov look bad, even if he didn't do anything more than utilize the right to have his own beliefs. Because there's an entire community, as you said, this is where I'm coming from, awareness, understanding. There's an entire community out there that feels shunned by him. And You can't take that away from them. I said from the top, he has the right to choose what he wants to do, to believe what he wants to believe, and they have the right, and anybody else has the right to view him however they want to.
We all have the right to judge him for it.
And certainly that community feels like he just said, you're not the same level of human as everybody else, right?
And by the way, if you're thinking to yourself, well, Ivan Provorov's been around for a while. They've done Pride Night before. So previously, the Flyers have only ever done optional rainbow stick tape
Yep.
during warmups. Ivan Provorov has not ever participated in that. I'm just saying he has a consistent track record on the issue.
And if I'm not mistaken, by the way, I think the only year they even really went stick tape was maybe last year or the year before. So they've only done it for like
I think Provorov. It was both years. I think it's been a couple of years running.
But
now.
Provorov's got an entire career worth of he played for 4 or 5 years, where this was not even it wasn't even a thing as far as I know.
I feel like it goes back further than you think, but
branching. Well, I think that the efforts do. I think the pregame stuff does not, especially within this organization.
Okay.
I think.
Okay. Yeah.
I just don't recall ever seeing
I got you.
Seeing it as much. But in addition to Provorov, it makes Provorov look bad, obviously, but it makes the organization he plays for looks bad because that's who he plays for. Ownership looks bad if they truly did not know anything about this, because that reflects A, a lack of communication, and B, just prolongs prolongs an entire off season and beyond worth of times that we've talked about the level of incompetence that the organizational, functioning is.
Slava Voinov won a job in North America.
This is something that's become regular discussion when it comes to the Flyers in terms of why does it seem like nobody's ever on the same page?
Can we trade for Austin Watson and Slava Voinov?
But what it really does is it diminishes the efforts that players like Scott Lawton and James Van Riemsdyk put into this and what they did. So I'd say really nobody wins among the vast population of fans in this city, because and beyond this country and beyond too, really, because the divide in opinion on this, and this is 30,000 foot view from where I sit, the vast majority of the divide in this and whatever isn't done cordially or respectfully. It's done hatefully. Yeah. And that's the real tragedy here, is that if you want an example that this type of hate still rages on, never mind the one hockey player that didn't put on a jersey because of his beliefs. An entire portion of the fan base, and some people who maybe aren't hockey fans at all,
100%
use this story as a way to express their opinion,
yep.
which frankly no one should give a damn about.
I'm willing to bet that people who had never heard Ivan Provorov's name, who had never watched an NHL game, bought his jersey on Wednesday morning. I'm 100% positive of that fact.
Probably. And it's why I really never have anything to say on the matter personally, outside of I put an initial tweet out when the statement came out, the statement that the Flyers made, and said right off the bat, this is a bad look.
Yep.
And just because but I've said nothing further in reflection on my personal thoughts on this. Listen, from my viewpoint of the whole thing, where I sat that night and what I have to do following that game, first of all, I have to spend the first 60 minutes of the game itself not being biased towards anything, because I'm up there to cover the team.
Right.
But it's also not my place to throw bias into a story that involves, that's rooted in social justice issues. It's not I can't, from a writing standpoint, I can't inject myself into that story.
I understand.
And that's my choice to keep that stuff off of my public profile.
And I respect the journalistic integrity.
No, and I keep that stuff off my public profile because, quite frankly, I don't find that it's anyone's business either. I'm not a professional athlete whose job is a privilege that makes millions of dollars and allows for a lifestyle that most people dream of having, right?
Yep.
That player has a platform. Theoretically, I guess I have one too, because I put myself out there publicly to do a job. But I'm not naive to the fact that most people on any given day, with whatever I would have to say, would sit there and say, "Who cares? Who gives a damn?" And that most days I don't even utilize social media outside of doing the job, because to me it's become nothing more than an imaginary soapbox, a stage that people go out and be performers and caricatures of themselves and try to gain validation from their own personal beliefs to make them feel better about themselves,
That being said, I ain't reading the comments on this podcast. Anyway.
I don't know. We'll see if we, and this is the point, we'll see if we even get any, because depending on off of it, some people are going to sit there and go, who cares why you're talking about it, right?
Yep.
Or they'll use it.
And we will get into the hockey soon here, I promise.
Or they'll use, because I'm wrapping it up too.
Absolutely.
Or they'll use it as a way to express their own beliefs for validation. Like I said, because it's either everybody turns it into a way to bash somebody else's opinion, or uses it as their own soapbox to put out their own beliefs and gain validation from it. So I don't use social media like that anymore. I rarely go on there. And that's pretty much where I'm going to leave it. Nobody wins. We should all simply just think about each perspective to this. understand that Ivan Provorov does have has a right, and based on his upbringing and where he's from, he may stand true to his beliefs. Yet we also have to acknowledge that he can be perceived in any way by anybody based on how it makes them feel, especially when you think about really think about how it looks to the LGBTQ plus community and how they feel based on everything.
Right.
That may be a challenging thing to do, but that's how conversations happen. That's how growth happens. That's how progress is made. And that's where I'm going to leave it.
Yeah,
just try to think about people's perspectives, and otherwise you're entitled to whatever you want to believe, whatever you want to think, and whatever you want to realistically, whatever you want to say. That's America.
Yeah.
But,
and we're not going to stay on it too much longer. I'm going to wrap it up here too. I think the thing that disappointed me the most is when he said, I respect everyone's choices. And in that community, in the queer community, that's tough. It's not a choice. Mm-hmm. So there's really no way to hard left turn out of here. So let's talk.
I'll give you one way to kind of get out of here.
Let's talk about the game.
Well, but that's kind of the point. Yeah. That's the way to get out of here is that was the shame of it. It was a great game that night.
It was a great
It was
game.
A fun game.
Yep.
I feel particularly bad for people who had a moment within the game in some way. Like Kevin Hayes scored his first career hat trick.
And nobody cares.
Do you think, like, when you think about for him, everything that he's been through, and it's like, look at this moment you have, and every teammate that was on the ice when that net was empty was gunning for it. Get him that goal.
Shortly after he's named to his first All-Star game, which was
exactly.
Like, come on, there's a Disney movie coming out of this. Like, if he scores the overtime winner in the All-Star game, they're making a movie.
I really have to give him a lot of credit, by the way, because I don't know how many weeks ago it would have been. It wasn't many. But there was a point in time, I mean, at this point, it's probably just a little bit over a month ago that we're probably talking about this, because that was when the healthy scratch happened, all that type of stuff. He looked like he was as disinterested as anybody, and this was going to end badly. And since the calendar flipped to 2023, he's been on a roll again. It's
almost like John Tortorella did that for a reason.
If I'm counting correctly, by the way, in the month of January alone, I believe that is 11 points.
In 9-10 games?
He's on a good run right now. And even when you get into a game, and like a game like last night's, there's not much that's going to be happening in that game, but he's a big part of what ends up happening down the road. He gets the primary on the goal that gives him the lead, Like, he's putting himself in spots again to be a key contributor, and I feel like it's funny that we're talking about the hat trick in a game against Anaheim, because the game against Anaheim on the West Coast is kind of where this started. He had 2 assists that night, and it was like, okay, it's coming back. And then they played Arizona, and it was 3-point game.
Here it comes.
And then he's kind of, in most of the games they've played, hold for a couple where they weren't very good. You know what it's going back to? Remember the year that they were bubble playoffs and all that and things like but
good times.
But remember the record they had when he scored a goal?
It was something ridiculous.
Obnoxious. Like, it was like he would score a goal and they would be 21, 2, and 3 or something.
Something stupid.
How very Boston Bruins of them, 2022, 23 Boston Bruins of them, to have a record that, like, the losses are minimal and the wins are majority, right? Like, a crazy majority. It's almost happening again. And the funny thing is he's scored in 2 games so far since January started. He's got a goal against Arizona and the hat trick, and that's the only times he's scored a goal. But, and to be honest, it's even funnier he's got 3 games that he has scored a goal in since December started. 3. But the assists are piling up, and the impact he's having on setting up teammates is happening. Do you know what I like? And I'm not trying to compare the talent level of the player. Don't take this for what that is. But how very Claude Giroux of him to set up a bunch of teammates to be he's up to 28 assists on the year.
He doesn't have that power play clapper that Claude
has.
No,
but he's up to 28 assists on the year.
It's pretty good.
He was sitting on 40 some odd points or something like that for like he was at something like 35 and like he was at 35 and 35, something like that, and he was sitting on it for a while.
Right. He
and
was
then
pretty
all
consistently,
of a sudden,
yeah.
I actually maybe even want to pull that back a little further because I feel like it was something like he was at 33 and 29 or 33 and 30, and it was like, look, the point per game pace. And then all of a sudden, he didn't do anything for 9-10 games,
Right.
and it was all of a sudden it turned into now we're 40 games in or 38 games in, and he's still at 33 points. Okay, what happened here? What's going on?
Yeah.
And
he had a bit of a slump. He seemed disinterested.
Because
what Kevin Hayes does.
No, but it had everything to do with what was going on. He went through forget that he was named an all-star. It was like he was going through a time when, if you know, like I had a buddy of mine who's a Bruins fan, texted me during Monday's game and goes, Kevin Hayes is on the third line. Like, why? And I went, 'cause Torts. That's why. Like,
fair.
And to be fair to Tortorella, he recently it's been because they got a good thing going lately with the amount of games that they've won. He's not changing line. It's about as, to be honest, I can't remember over the last 2-3 years or 2-3 seasons, I guess, because the two before this we.
Oh, no kidding.
I can't remember a stretch of games that has gone on for maybe this long, where the forward lines remained this consistent. Like, this is working. Kevin Hayes is playing on a line right now with Scott Lawton and Wade Allison, and it's been that way for 3 weeks.
And they look great.
And there's no reason to change it.
None at all.
You know what I mean? Like, there hasn't been. Well, and in fairness, do you know why there's been no reason to change that one? Because there's been no reason to change Joel Farabee, Noah Cates, and Travis Konechny. There's been no reason to change whatever the other one is. What is it?
That line.
James Morgan, Frost, and Owen Tippett. There's been no reason to change that grouping. So when there's no reason to change those, there's no reason to change that. And to be fair, there have been a couple of in-game instances, like the game on Thursday against
mix it up a little bit on the
Chicago,
fly.
where when it's not going, John Tortorella's thrown the lines in the blender and said, let's try to find something. But to John Tortorella's credit, after Thursday went the way that it did, it was, I'm going to start the game going right back to the lines that were before against Detroit. Yep. And lo and behold, what worked?
Yeah.
You know? Two of the most effective lines are the ones that pitched in the goals in that game that you win.
And we are recording this on Sunday morning, kind of usual. Have you happened to see has there been a morning skate? Did you happen to see any lines?
There won't be a morning. No, there won't be a morning skate when they play the night
for back-to-backs. Yeah.
But
I assume the lines are going to stay the same. Pretty close.
They haven't. Well, they haven't changed, and the lineup hasn't changed in a long time. I would assume, given the way that Saturday's game went, that Felix Sandstrom is getting a start on Sunday. So. I would assume. I don't want to make an assumption. I mean, there's an element of it where John Tortorella at some point I feel like is going to play the Carter Hart can start back-to-back games card. I tread lightly on it right now.
Why, John? Like, I get it, but why?
But there is also an element to, and something that is worth noting as we kind of move forward here with the week that's going to be ahead. There is an element to that where I sit there and I say, you know what? You have 4 more games this week, and then you're off for over a week. Everybody except for Kevin Hayes, who goes to the All-Star game, you may be able to get away with it and then lean on the fact that there's a week off. And for the most part during the course of that, nobody's going to do anything.
But why risk it?
Well, I agree. That's why I would start Sandstrom.
If they're in the playoff hunt and need the 2 points because Winnipeg's a good team, okay, sure. But John, what are we doing here, buddy?
That's why I would sit there and say that's why I would say Sandstrom gets to start against Winnipeg, and then go ahead, give Carter Hart the last 3 of the week because you got days off in between every single one of them. So Carter Hart can start against LA, he can start against Minnesota, and he can start against Winnipeg. I fully expect him to start against Winnipeg on the road because as you start to hit that Manitoba, type of play, they usually like to give, Manitoba, Alberta, they like to give Carter Hart kind of a homecoming of sorts with that type of stuff. So I understand that. I fully expect him to start that game. But but just for this one, I would say, probably give it to Sandstrom. Sandstrom's played a lot, by the way. I think Sandstrom on that conditioning run got like 7 straight starts in the minors.
Nice.
And played a lot, played well especially toward the end. I think you give him a shot with it, sure. But in saying that, we cannot diminish the fact that outside of Monday, Carter Hart had a pretty good week. Well, had a pretty rough week until all of a sudden he gave you a reminder of why he's still worthy of being called the number 1.
Absolutely.
Like I understand how Monday looks. I understand how last Sunday looked. And it's a shame because, okay, again, back to the Tuesday game against Anaheim for a second, and part of what was lost in the shuffle with everything else we've talked about.
Yeah.
So first of all, Sam Ersson, by the way, just another start and another win. So he's 5-0. Like, he's playing well.
Looks good.
Now I want to pump the brakes on two things with Ersson. Number one, he's played outside of the game against Buffalo, where I really thought Buffalo had better for him. 2 wins against Anaheim. The win against LA is good. I'll give him that one. And a win against San Jose.
And you know what?
You're playing the weaker teams.
For a kid's first stint in the NHL, when he really shouldn't be there and he's only there for injury purposes, give him the soft target, let him play well, let him go back to the minors with some real confidence.
And he should, absolutely. Yep. And I love his poise. I love the way he's kind of handled himself. I think he's, if I'm being honest, I really do believe I think he's supplanted Felix Sandstrom in terms of goalie rank.
Absolutely.
I just think that the
contract situation. Yeah.
Right, the easiest thing to do was he doesn't have to go through waivers, and Sandstrom does. And knowing
quite frankly, somebody will take a chance on a Felix Sandstrom as some goalie depth heading into the playoffs.
Because no team out there looks at a goalie that goes on waivers and doesn't think, I couldn't use one more.
Waivers who? Trade him.
Well, no. I'm saying that.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm saying as of Thursday, I think Thursday, when they're not prepared to send him down, or they're not prepared to move him because there's no reason to move Sandstrom right this moment either.
Right. No, sure, but the
easiest thing to do is waivers, not waivers.
Absolutely.
If you put him on waivers, there's a really good chance he's getting claimed.
He's gone.
So you don't want to lose him for nothing. But I do think that if we are talking about
Felix Sandstrom makes the Buffalo Sabres a playoff team.
That's an interesting one, but possibly, yeah. But I don't think that there's I really do believe that I think that if as you're watching it that Ersson made enough of an impression because it didn't turn into just a 3-game tryout.
Right.
He gave them enough of a reason that instead of just saying, hey, those 3 games were great and Carter Hart's back and we're done with this, they gave themselves a reason to move Sandstrom to the minors for conditioning and say, and he got 2 more starts,
extended look.
And he got 2 more starts out of it. And what did he do? Pitch his first career shutout and then win another game against Anaheim. Where, by the way, I think that one of the goals that he gave up against Anaheim again came in the last 2 minutes of a game where it's all but said and done.
I do want to mention, by the way, I like Samuel Ersson a lot, but he's my second favorite goalie in that Anaheim game on Tuesday. I love me some Stoli. Come on now.
By the way, Stoli played out of his mind in that game for most of it.
First of all, I think that was a statement out of Anthony Stolarz. Give up on me, why don't you? Second of all, I think he's always been a talented goalie. He's friggin' massive.
He is massive. He is a massive human being.
I wish the absolute best for Anthony Stolarz. I love Stoli.
It always really kind of goalies like that, especially too, by the way, because he's so tall, he's massive in that respect. He's not exactly he's still got some he's not the most he's pretty muscular.
He's got some youthful lankiness about him, is what you're trying to say.
Kind of, yeah, because you get goalies like that who, I mean. I will say he's one of the most muscular six goalies that I've seen in terms of.
By the way, he just turned 28 this past Friday, so happy birthday, Stoli.
He was one of the best guys to deal with when he was here. He was always such a class act, and there were times where that wasn't possible. By the way, where him playing in that game this particular week was not always possible.
Yeah.
He's had some rough injuries.
He's had some rough injuries. We have reported on this show way back in the day that he was never going to play again.
Well, he had a very gruesome injury in juniors, and then he had multiple knee surgeries and things like that.
Apparently, he had his knee pretty darn close to fully reconstructed.
I believe it.
Yeah.
He's come close multiple times. And so, yeah, it was good, good for him and all that stuff. Outside of the goalies in that game, by the way, Rasmus Ristolainen, shorthanded goal.
A shorthanded little beauty.
In this economy?
A little forehand, backhand shelf beauty. Okay, Rasmus.
Not that. By the way, not that this guy ever plays on the penalty kill, but I thought it was Van Riemsdyk. because I'm sitting here going.
You saw a 5 lumbering down the ice.
I saw a 5. Yeah, I saw the last half of the number, and I'm going, look at this guy lumbering down the middle and going to the backhand nice. Because I've seen James Van Riemsdyk like make that move before too.
Sure.
So it's like, why not? And then all of a sudden, it's like, wait,
it's Risto
Linen, who like 10 seconds earlier, not really, but like I'm figuratively speaking, 10 seconds earlier had a massive hit along the boards, totally clean. And is like
beautiful hit.
Yeah. And then has an assist later in the game too, for good measure. Like he had a game.
Risto showed up.
And by the way, I think if I'm not like he had an assist on the only goal of the Chicago game. Like all of a sudden the guy who could not put up a point for like
his first of the season, correct? His first goal?
Oh yeah, the goal was on Tuesday was. Yeah.
Hilarious.
So for a guy who for however long couldn't put up points, he's got like all of a sudden he's got 5 points and 3 of them are in the last 3 games.
Right. Hey man.
Like
listen, here's the thing. 2019 St. Louis Blues, baby. He can be Alex Pietrangelo. What's the problem? He can be a hybrid of Alex Pietrangelo and Colton Parayko. What's the problem?
I love that you're still on this. I probably a little bit more Colton Parayko than Alex Pietrangelo for sure. But,
well, I just meant size-wise, he's a little closer to Petro.
But you can't deny he's playing better. You can't deny it.
You can't. And
speaking of playing better, how about another highlight reel goal within this game?
Oh my goodness!
Morgan
Frost. Come on now. That goalie had a family. Stop it. Between the legs on the goal line shelf. You're doing that to Stoli. Come on now.
It was,
didn't you guys work out in Stone Harbor together at some point? Come on. Jeez.
Now, by the way, that's late second period. You know what my vantage point is.
Yep.
It was right in front of me, and
Pretty.
I'm
down the goal line.
I'm going to tell you right now that as it happened.
Did you see it live? Like, did you catch it? I mean, did you catch it live? Like, the between the legs, because the first time through, I didn't really see it. I had to see the replay and go,
no, I turned to the television to watch the replay to make sure I saw what I thought I saw, and I saw what I saw.
Now, okay. That's some high-level skill out of Morgan Frost. We need to see it a little more. We need to see it a little more consistently. But that's high-level skill.
We need to see him have points against, bigger points against anybody not named the Arizona Coyotes, but nonetheless, I mean, look, over the last handful of games, even since that Arizona game, assist against Washington, he scored against Anaheim, he scored the goal against Chicago. The goal against Chicago, by the way, I do want to give him credit for, because that's a great pick-your-spot goal from a little bit of a ways out. That's the type of stuff that keeps you going in the league, especially when you're a player who kind of isn't touted for, like, I want to say not for much else. Like, he's been a good defensive player, but when you're not the physical kind, because he's a smaller player, so you're not physical. You're not, you want to be known for the offensive skill set in some capacity, right?
That's fair.
That's the way to be known for the offensive skill set. So.
Yeah. Yep. And it's incredible to see it out of Morgan Frost, because it's a guy that we've been looking at for a long time, waiting for, a bit of an offensive uptick.
Sure. And that was another moment in that game that was kind of fun. Like, you look for some of these situations where you find a guy who's doing something that you kind of, that's why I said it was Hayes with the hat trick. Oh, like, by the way, in addition to kind of the whole theme of the night in general, or what it was supposed to be going in, Scott Laughton had a really strong game as well, by the way, without scoring a goal, but he was all sorts of around the everything involved in that game. He had 2 assists. Like, he was 2 assists, and he was on the ice when Hayes scored the hat trick goal and like made a beeline for him. Like, because I think that Laughton's forget. You know what? I don't even need to make a comment on Laughton in terms of like being a teammate or whatever. Like, Scott Laughton's the guy is going to be the captain of this team, and maybe not not at any point the rest of this year, but by next year, John Tortorella is not going to have to think too hard about who the leader in the room is. It's Scott Laughton.
So here's the problem. Okay, me watching this team as a fan. Here's the problem I have currently.
Okay,
Kevin Hayes is getting hot. Travis Konecny's pretty warm. The team's starting to play well.
Right.
They got 35 games left. They're going to go 20, 10, and 5 and miss the playoffs by 4 points.
Oh, I don't know about missing the playoffs by 4 points.
I'm not putting the numbers together, and that's not a real prediction. It's just the kind of thing that I know is going to happen to this team, and it kind of brings us in towards our last topic of the show here.
No, because at the end of the day, like, here's the point of exactly what you're trying to say. Despite the fact that they lost 2 games this week, they're still 6 points out of a playoff spot.
Picking 13th doesn't make you a winning team. It just friggin' doesn't. Not when you draft like this team friggin' drafts.
Which is what my point kind of was last week when we talked about it, which is I think that if you end up picking there, if this is the path you're going to go, which it very clearly is at this point, it seems. Because let's put it this way. What did John Tortorella say throughout the course of the week? He said it about the Anaheim game, and then he said it following the Chicago game, and he said it about the games they just played against Detroit.
Yep.
The goal is don't lose 2 in a row. If you're going to lose a game, if you're going to have a dud, then don't replicate it. Well, they haven't replicated it.
I know. That's the disappointing part.
It's disappointing to you. Well, I know.
Well, because I think that's what the team needs, right? Like, if I thought this team, listen, if you've been listening to the show for a while, you know, nobody on planet Earth wants the Flyers to succeed quite as much as I do. Nobody wants the team. I want to strap the orange-colored glasses back on. I really do.
It's been a while since I've heard you say orange-colored glasses.
Because they've been awful, and how can you look positively about
they've
this
been
team?
off is what it is. Instead
exactly.
Of awful, they've been off. You have taken the glasses off.
Well, right. And but that's what I'm saying. Like, picking 13th and getting a bunch of guys like Morgan Frost who don't show offensive ability until they're 23 doesn't make you a winning elite organization. Like, it just doesn't. You either have to make savvy trades or draft in the top 5. And this team isn't capable of doing either. You know what I mean? Like, it just...
Right.
If I thought this team had the capability to make a run, and, like, quite frankly, it's John Tortorella.
Yeah,
the man's got magic.
Yep. You knew what you were getting this year. You had to know.
But looking at it realistically, I know they're, like you said, only 6 points out or whatever it is here on January 22nd. They're not a Stanley Cup winning team. They're probably not really a playoff team.
Because the thing that bothers me most about the situation that they are in is not it's not even what it means from a draft perspective, because everybody wants the layup, and that does and very clearly if we need any reason to revisit Nolan Patrick.
More than anything, I just want the direction.
But it's not a guarantee, right? Drafting at the top is, as much as you want it to be a guarantee, it's sometimes never a guarantee. You can have the best player in the world, and he can be one injury away from not being what he used to.
You can't think like that. It's pretty close.
That's not what I'm saying.
Okay.
If you're gonna go this route though, and try to be as close to successful as possible, and be in the middle of the mix and all that stuff like that, what it ends up meaning is that your work is 10 times harder, maybe more than that even, when it comes to draft, develop, get a guy out of it. The Boston Bruins do not pick at the top of the draft every year. Right. But they still can land on a guy like David Pastrnak in the middle of being a team that was in the Stanley Cup final a year earlier.
Right.
Pastrnak went in the 2014 draft at 25th overall and is probably their best player.
To be fair, the Bruins do have that pretty famous 11, 12, 13 swing and a miss or whatever it was from a couple of years ago.
Is it, though? Because this year Jake DeBrusk was looking pretty good.
Yeah, but 1 out of 3 in the top 15 isn't
That's
exactly,
fair. No, but...
Zachary Senyshyn hasn't done a whole lot lately.
I
can't name the third one, but
then it was Zboril, wasn't it?
It was Jacob Zboril, okay.
But in fairness, then the following year they picked 13th and got Charlie McAvoy.
Right. Fair.
Like, you can still land on a guy who's good out of the top 10 to 15.
You just have to be able to develop
what
properly.
The hell you're doing. Exactly.
Oh. Are you trying to imply that the Flyers don't know what they're doing?
Does the track record speak for itself? If the last 5 years of drafts, if part of 2017 and beyond of drafts was, because I don't want to take away from the fact that they picked 5th last year and Cutter Gauthier may be a really good player. I don't want to take away from the fact that maybe Tyson Forrester turns out to be a guy. But 2 years ago they didn't have a first-round pick because they traded it to get Risto, and the guy they took in the second round hasn't made any noise at all. When was the last time you heard from Samu Tuamalo?
So that's a little tougher because how much noise do we usually hear out of the European leagues? Not a whole lot.
We should be hearing about him as much as we seem to hear about Emil Andre.
Okay.
Because we do hear enough about players like that. And to be fair, by the way, they had when Sandstrom was coming up and Eriksson was coming up, we would hear all the time about how great the goalies in the Swedish league were doing.
Right. Well, and my point, by the way, about the whole rebuild thing is you're not going to be bad enough to rebuild. All your players are still going to go out there and try their hardest. And John Tortorella is still going out there to win every game. And, I don't blame any of them for that. They're there to get paid. They're there to do their jobs to the best of their ability and to be professionals. What you need is a state-sponsored shutdown. You need Chuck Fletcher and the management team to come in and go, all right, we're trading you, and we're trading you, and we're trading you. And maybe not break it all the way down. But you take out some pieces. You move Ivan Provorov, like we talked about. Trade him for something in the future.
No, but you're sitting
there
thinking there. You're thinking about it like Provorov's part of that group. Kevin Hayes is part of that group. You start thinking about the guys that maybe have a value. It's getting to if he was having kind of half of the year that he's having, you may throw Travis Konechny into that mix. I think that now you can't. Because he's too good to not be part of the path moving forward.
Well, I don't think you can trade him for a realistic package at this point with just the incredible production. I don't know if there are any playoff teams that can take him now.
I guess so. Yeah, I guess so. And I kind of disagree with you, by the way, on the whole premise of that. Not in the sense that you need to start having the state sales you're talking about, but I think that the bigger part of the discussion is exactly again, it's kind of going back to what I started saying, which is you don't have to pick at the top every year to get yourself out of something like this. You can find the pieces. It's who's doing it.
I just don't trust the organization to do that.
But there you go. That's the point.
I need them to get a layup because I don't trust them to take the three-pointer.
Can I be? Then let's be honest about why everybody's pissed off about the fact that they're not going to get the layup this year. It's not because of who they were going to get because in the grand scheme of things, I think that after a certain point, if they didn't pick first, if they didn't,
I believe this organization is absolutely capable of ruining Matvei Michkov or Adam Fantilli or any of those second guys. Absolutely.
Right, but that wasn't where I was going.
Oh, okay.
Well, you'll understand when I get there.
Okay.
I think that at some point in time, even if it wasn't number one, even if it wasn't Bedard, people would get over that.
Sure.
Sooner rather than later, if it was, okay, it's not Bedard, but this also isn't the Patrick Kane, James, and Riemsdyk draft. Fantilli's going to be pretty good, or Leo Carlsson's going to be pretty good, right? There would have been a consolation prize that people would have been fine with because it was still part of that top 3-4 group,
right?
Because it still felt like a layup. And oh, by the way, in the midst of that being possibly a layup pick because of where it was in the top 4. Chances are that would have also led to the other part of the equation that everybody wanted, which is it's not going to be Chuck Fletcher running this show. It's not going to be this guy, right? You know what I mean? Everybody wanted it. I don't think it was near as much about Bedard as it was you'll get one of those guys. And oh, by the way, the guy who's going to make the pick isn't Chuck Fletcher. But now I think people are sitting there starting to realize Chuck Fletcher's going to be the guy handling the deadline, and Chuck Fletcher might be the guy making that pick.
We're creeping towards the point where you can't fire him now because you're getting into the middle of trade deadline territory.
I mean, they're a week away from the All-Star break. Right. And once they're at the All-Star break, by the time they come back, there is less than a month until the deadline. Do you really think that they're going to make a change at this point? I mean,
no. Maybe you can make a trade make a change after the deadline because at that point he doesn't really have a whole lot to do before the draft.
I would even say theoretically, could you make the change that everybody expects you to make? Actually, probably because he's been in the room the entire time. So I guess theoretically you could do that. But is it real? Again, this is what I was talking about when we had this conversation a few weeks back. Is it really him? Or is it all the stuff that Chuck Fletcher talked about leading up to that he's just going to go along with because you can't change course anymore?
Right.
And I do want to, one caveat I want to make about this, by the way, is I can't take it away from the team if they do make the trades that everybody thinks they're going to make and then still end up winning.
Sure. No, fair enough.
If this team ends up continuing to win games, despite the fact that they may not have, let's say, Kevin Hayes on the roster, You can't take that away from them.
I'd be surprised if they moved Kevin Hayes.
Well, I already told I would
maybe
too.
In the off season.
No,
but.
and I already told, and this is why I already told you this. I feel like I think this was a big part of our conversation last week. Was I think you can move the two guys that everybody thinks you're going to move, and then still have an internal almost upgrade.
I understand.
If you like if you move James and Reams, I think your natural pivot is, well, Bobby Brink's ready. Let's bring him into the mix, and he's as good from a production standpoint. Because let's face it, you know who's not getting a lot of points during this stretch where they've won some games? James Van Riemsdyk. He's not the one putting up the points. Nope. So what if Bobby Brink starts putting up points and adds to this? You know, like the game that they played against Detroit just now was probably the first game in a long time that they've won without having a bigger offensive output.
That's fair. That is the first kind of grinded out, low scoring, rely
lean
on the
on Carter Hart
victory.
You know
that we've seen in a little while.
I don't know. You know what? I want to pull back on that. The only other one I feel like is even in the ballpark is the game against Washington from a week earlier.
Okay, and obviously we're talking about wins. We're not talking about the 6-0 drubbing by the Boston Bruins.
But you know what? In fairness to your point about where they are in the playoff picture and all of that type of stuff, outside of the Chicago game, did anything go against our expectations?
No.
Nope. They got shelled by Boston. We figured the game against Boston wasn't going to be. I mean,
game was over.
The only thing I think that maybe we weren't sure about was, is this team going to put up enough of a fight to still be in it? They probably will lose the game, but are they going to be more in it? And they clearly weren't.
No.
But then they did exactly what we thought was going to happen against Anaheim. The Chicago
they bounced back
game
strong against Anaheim. They didn't just squeak out a win. They dominated Anaheim
to the point where, to your point about Stoli, he was very much keeping him in that game until
he made 37 saves, 34 saves.
The game was 1-1 at the midpoint.
Yep.
Until 2 goals later in
and the shots were something along the lines of 25-8 at some point. Like that game was gnarly.
Second intermission, it was 30-13.
I almost put some money down on the Ducks just because Stoli looked that good. He looked steal the game good.
And again, in fairness to the Flyers in general, the game against Chicago, out of the grouping of games that they have played since coming back from the holiday break, that was the first and only dud against the team that you felt like they didn't have a talent gap. Like, they've played 2 duds before if we're going there, but okay, losing like that to Toronto and losing like that to Boston is a lot more expected than what happened against the Chicago Blackhawks.
Right. You expect to get your doors blown off by those top-tier elite teams.
But the point I'm also making is they've beaten everybody else. They are 9-3 since coming back from the break. And the only game that they've lost that you're like, what exactly happened here, was that game against Chicago.
They're going to go 20-10-5. I'm telling you. The rest of the way.
And to be honest, and this is a great way to kind of cap off this episode, they've hit a week now where I kind of sit there and go, now you've got my attention. Because we know they're not in the same class as Boston. We kind of know they're not in the same class as Toronto, definitely from a skill level, but they couldn't keep up there. Now you're going to play the teams like outside of the Toronto-Boston games.
Sure.
To me, the best 2 games the best 2 teams that they've played and shown that they can beat are the back-to-back, the home and home against Washington, and the game that, to be honest, was more of a surprise at the time it happened because it was so early in this run, but when they beat LA. And you're going to get LA at home this week, and you're going to get 2 against Winnipeg, and you're going to get Minnesota. And just to kind of put all that into perspective for you, LA's kind of mid-pack. LA's a really funny team to me because they're in the playoff picture comfortably. They're 12th in the league standings, and they've got a goal differential of -9.
I know.
I don't understand that team for anything.
I don't know how an Anze Kopitar-led team is -9, but anyway.
Minnesota is right in that same picture, too, because Minnesota's 14th, very much in the range of like where Pittsburgh and Washington are. But we give Washington the credit for being in the playoffs and being, Washington is not that far off from being one of the teams that all of a sudden would then swap with another Metro team to get one of those not guaranteed, you know what I mean? Like be one of the top 3.
I'm
really curious about the Winnipeg game because Winnipeg is 6th in the league, and that's where I want to see this.
I will say this, though. 2 things kind of going in the Flyers' favor is if they do decide to make a run here, and if they do, knock on wood, if they do make the playoffs, Carter Hart is good enough to steal you games. Any night, any time.
Do we need to talk about that save at the end of the game, by the way?
Right. I'll be honest with you, I didn't actually say it because between the Eagles and the UFC fights, didn't watch a whole lot of the Detroit game on.
No. In fairness, neither did I.
Right.
But to be honest with you, this is really funny how this worked out. The save that we're talking about at the very end of the game, it happened right as the Eagles game hit halftime.
Nice.
So I literally
flipped right over.
Well, no, I ended up missing it because I flipped over right as halftime hit, and the game had just ended. But they were literally in the moment reacting to the fact that, oh my goodness, he just made this crazy save. And to be honest, without seeing it live as it happens and waiting for a replay, I'm not gonna lie that my brain went Michael Neuvert, like,
oh
are we getting paddle save here?
Yeah.
It was good. I mean, it was a good save. The pad on the goal line, and it was incredible. And that's Carter. And I kind of, and listen, maybe I was in a little bit of an angsty mood already because of the fact that, like, the Eagles were killing it at that point, and it was like, this isn't Minnesota and blah blah blah, all that type of stuff. I was having a,
I understand. Listen, I understand the internal struggle of a Philadelphia fan.
And watching the Eagles is where I can be, as opposed to when I do the Flyer stuff.
When I close my eyes, sometimes I still see Joe Juravicius running down the vet sideline.
Oh, what a pull!
I know, right? I know.
But to go off of that, like, all I could go back to was, because this happened on Monday. To be, like, again, feels like ancient news at this point because it was Monday, but the Carter Hart isn't the number one, they should trade him conversation came back out. You have your reasons for bringing up trade Carter Hart.
Right.
Your reasons for trade Carter Hart are exactly what we saw against Detroit.
Well,
because when it comes down to it, he wins you the game.
Right. So if he's going to win you games, that's fine. If he's going to get you into the playoffs, you got to be able to use it in the playoffs. So if you're there, and again, I don't think it's going to happen, but I did mention the 2019 Blues within the last couple shows.
Can I bring up a team that I think he would remind me of to an extent also?
The 2001 Ducks?
No, the 2001. Are you thinking?
Or 2002 to 3, whatever year Jean-Sébastien Giguère just absolutely dragged them to the final.
The year that he won the Conn Smythe despite
in the losing effort,
series. Yeah. No, I'm thinking for much more recency bias. I'm thinking of the 2020 Montreal Canadiens for a second.
Yeah, absolutely.
Where, I'm sorry, Carey Price just wills you into this thing.
So you get the goaltending. And this team may very well add Sean Couturier to the roster.
Yeah, I don't,
I don't know the status.
I'm a little bit less confident from a week ago, only because we don't hear anything about this guy anymore.
I totally understand. And with the Philadelphia Flyers, they're gone until they're back.
No, and he's still weeks away, so it's not like we're like, you know what? I think a reason why we aren't hearing much is because, again, they've got a week until the All-Star break, and then it's going to be
a big evaluation week.
But pump the brakes, and then you gotta like something else that's kind of interesting. I find their schedule fascinating in certain aspects. No, I really do, because they got this game against Detroit that they just played was one game that separated 4 games at home. They go on the road really quick at the end of this upcoming week before the All-Star break for a couple games. They come back to 4 more in a row at home, spread out over the course of like a week and a half, following a week off completely, following 4 and 5 at home before a quick 2-game trip. Like,
makes sense.
They're playing a lot at home.
Yeah.
And which has to feel good. You don't go
time
anywhere.
to rack up some points.
It's kind of the time, but it's kind of a time to be comfortable.
Man, and then you look at the March schedule.
Bed.
They only play 4 road games in March. The entire month of March. And it's
3 of them in a row, and then
it's a 3-game road trip and then a game in Ottawa.
Now I'm going to can I tell you something about that stretch of games coming up, because
I don't know if I've ever seen a 7-game homestand before.
It's rare, but it happens.
Yeah.
When you play 2 games at home, go on the road, 2 at home, go on the road for 2.
You pick up a rhythm.
Yeah, but it doesn't pile up as much. I just want to call back to John Tortorella.
We've been at home for too long.
5 games was at home for too long. So what is 7 going to look like? Like, I do think, like, there is something to, because here's the thing. They're not going to practice for a portion of that week off. You know that.
Oh, yeah.
Like they're gonna come back from playing Winnipeg on the road, take Sunday off. A bunch of them will probably hightail it over to the Eagles game because they can.
Oh yeah,
let's be real.
They have the money,
and then they may practice during the early part of that week. They may not at all. And then the All-Star weekend's going to happen, and then the Sunday before they'll come home and they'll practice after the All-Star game.
I'm also willing to bet that a lot of them won't be at the Eagles games because they're going to be leaving for Cabo Saturday night.
I don't know.
They're going straight from Winnipeg to Tijuana.
Nope, I'll tell you. Nope, because I think they're going to come back here first as a team.
Oh, okay.
And then I think a bunch of them are going to.
Oh, then they'll go to the Eagles game. A bunch of them will go to the
Eagles game. Let's do the Eagles game. And then they'll take the rest of the. Well, I don't know. You got a point because I guess there's nothing that's really going to happen until Saturday. So, and I don't know how this works. Is this
a lot of guys take vacation, like 4-ish day vacation.
Is this still constituted as like the bye week thing where they're not supposed to necessarily have to do anything?
I don't believe they're supposed to do much.
No, because I think that some teams have that Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Every team has Thursday through Sunday. Like there's no games on the schedule, period.
I'm pretty sure every team has Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday as well.
No. I think there's some teams that have Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and some that have the following Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday.
Because it does look like there's some limited games that Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday.
So does this constitute like the bye week thing where everybody's supposed to just take off?
I think so.
So maybe there will be a few trips being taken at that given time, or maybe it won't matter. Like that they'll have from Monday on. Like
if the team tells an NHL player, "Hey, I'll see you in 5 days," that player's going to drink for 4 of them.
Yeah, I know, right?
Like a lot of them, But all right, why don't we get out of here? We've been kind of rambling for a little while here. I think that was a lot of fun. We will be back next week. We got some games to talk about. We'll be talking about kind of the lead into the All-Star break. Maybe we'll do something around that. Maybe we'll do some All-Star game predictions. I think that could be some fun. So
we'll see. You know what? I don't know about next Sunday specifically with this, but I do. No. We'll do it on a Sunday. That was
okay.
I don't know if that's when this is going to be relevant or if it's going to be the following week. Like right after the All-Star break happens, but it's going to be a great time with nobody playing to pull back and look at the entire league at that point.
I think next week we do it.
Next week we still have games to talk about is the point. So the week after when there's no games that the Flyers play to talk about, and then the whole league's been off for a little, it's going to be a great time to pull back and kind of like be like, hey, by the way, we got February, March, and April kind of to go.
Yeah.
And where is everybody stand? Who's going to make it? Who's not? Like talk
about some trade deadline stuff. Maybe some predictions over there.
I think it's for me. It's going to be a great time to look at the standings and talk about like who are the surprises, who are not, kind of stuff. I can't wait to see what the. This is totally non-Flyer related. I can't wait to see what the Bruins record is by this point.
I can't wait to see what 40-goal scorer they add at the trade deadline.
Speaking of 40-goal scorers, by the way, this is a great way to get out, too.
Oh, yeah. Every week. Connor McDavid, 88 points in 48 games. He's got 40 freaking goals.
In case you didn't know that the best player in the world wears number 97 for Edmonton.
Man.
When's that game in Philly, by the way? Because it's soon. It's early February. February 9th.
Yeah.
Because, man, I bet, like, I've had some rough scheduling stuff going on lately that I can't get down there all the time. I got to make it to that one.
You have to. I'm going to be disappointed in you if you don't.
You know what? I know I am. You know why? Because I've already kind of made plans that I'm not going to go to the Seattle game that's on Super Bowl Sunday afternoon. Because regardless
just in case.
Well, no, regardless of if they're playing or not. Because I'm going to, I want to have a get-together that night and all that type of stuff. So I'm going to kind of be doing some housekeeping items while I work around the fact that there's a game on.
Well, listen, if you don't make it down there to see Connor McDavid, I'm going to be disappointed.
No, I'm going to make it down there. I'm choosing not to go see Dave Haxtell, so make sure I can see Connor McDavid.
And I'm going to be disappointed in you, our listener, if you don't subscribe to us on YouTube. If you don't follow,
I love the segues.
If you don't follow our Twitter at YWT Podcast, if you don't follow Kevin at Kevin_Darcel, make sure you can check out the show anywhere so I'm not disappointed in you. It's on Facebook, Instagram, Podbean, iTunes, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon, Podbean, SportsTalkPhilly.com. You can find it everywhere. Like I said, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Kevin, any last words for this week?
Nope. Let's get out of here.
All right. We'll be back next week. See ya.